Welcome to Juhl Media live interview podcast. My name's Ching Juhl. I have been doing this program for almost 4 years now, and I have met so many wonderful people. They're musicians, filmmakers, entrepreneurs, and who else? Oh, like a public servant. And today, my special guest is Greg Williams. Let's welcome to Greg. Hello, Greg.
Hi, Ching. Thank you so much for having me today.
Of course, of course. Yeah, so great to reconnect with you. I believe we have met in a gig a while ago.
Yes, and I've been trying to think about which gig it was that we played on together.
In the cafe.
Well, was it the
The,
cafe or was it before the cafe?
maybe before the cafe, right? And then we all went to cafe to play.
Right, but I think then we went to. I think we were at the cafe, Cornelia Street Cafe again shortly before it closed. I want to say that was either 2016 or early 2017.
Wow, that's a long time ago. Yeah,
But we
you
may have
look
met
great.
before that.
Yeah, you look great. Still
Thank
the
you.
same. Yeah.
You too.
So yeah, lots of things happened in between. So tell me a little bit some key events in your life.
So, since I saw you at that gig, I let's see, finished my doctorate at the CUNY Graduate Center in Viola, and from there, been doing a lot of teaching, a lot of playing. Been teaching at Queens College the last few years, and also been trying to do a fair amount of freelancing. In terms of other places that I've been teaching, I did a couple of leave replacements in the last year and a half at the Eastman School of Music and also University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And then in terms of freelancing, I've been doing a fair amount of subbing with groups like the American Symphony Orchestra, American Ballet Theatre, and even a little bit on Broadway, most recently Phantom of the Opera and Sweeney Todd.
Wow, Phantom. Wow, Phantom. I thought Phantom closed.
It
And they.
did. So this was right before it closed.
Oh, okay.
That was
Yeah, I know someone who played with my string trio. Claire Chan has been playing Phantom for many years. She's a
Mhm.
violinist. Yeah, but anyway, so that's great. Doctor Williams, awesome. So tell me a little bit. I noticed you on social media lately, and you were very active to promote your new album. It's called
Yes,
Shadow. Yeah,
it's
tell us
called.
about. Yeah, tell us like why Shadows? Why you're playing some German composer who are not that famous, right?
So I. It's the reason why it's called Shadows, and actually, here's a copy of it. Sorry for the glare. It's the music, the unaccompanied viola sonatas of Gunter Raphael, and Gunter Raphael was a composer born and raised in Germany of uh, Jewish ancestry, particularly on his father's side. And he was raised as a Lutheran, I believe, for his entire life, and his father had converted as a young man, as was often common among Jewish men in the early 20th century, as a way to help gather career stability. And in the 1930s, shortly after Adolf Hitler came to power, uh, Günter Raphael was labeled by the government as half Jewish and was immediately fired from all of his positions. He was teaching at the Hochschule in Leipzig, and also at was an organist at several churches in Leipzig, and was basically forced to go underground for 12 years.
Wow.
So that's where the term shadows came from in this case.
So, what is a big shots again? So tell me a little bit about how you discover this. Is it a special event or for your homework, schoolwork? How did that happen?
Well, okay, so it's a little bit of a long story, so but so fasten your seatbelts, everyone. Uh, Essentially, I stumbled upon one of the sonatas that Gunter Raphael wrote in the summer of 2012. I was on my way to a chamber music festival, or a masterclass rather, in Litomyšl in Czechia, what was the Czech Republic. This was summer of 2012, and I was going to be working with our former teacher, Karen Richer, and when right beforehand, I stopped in Dresden and in a used bookshop, and I was just poking through, and all of a sudden, I stumbled upon this yellowed copy of one of the sonatas, and I was like, I've never heard of this composer before. And I was taking a look, and it kind of reminded me, just looking at it, of the music of Max Reger, whose viola, the suites that he wrote was 1915, 1916, were just a few years before this piece by Günter Raphael was written.
Wow. So what made you to get attracted to the style, the music? How long the whole sonata?
So this was the first sonata, which he wrote 1923-24. After that, bringing it to a lesson with Karen Richer, I thought, wow, this is really cool. And then lo and behold, I was, looking up his bio online and seeing, oh wow, he's got 3 sonatas for viola, or for solo viola, as well as several, or 2 sonatas for viola and piano, as well as 2 romances for viola and piano. So there's quite a bit of, and also a concertino, and there's also several pieces of chamber music. And I figured, wow, there's a lot here. No one knows who this composer is. Let me see if I can help, at least not in the United States. Let me see if I can help bring him out of the shadows a bit and into the spotlight.
Wonderful. So this you can see this image is the CD is on Amazon, right?
It's on
And it,
Amazon. It's on, as of today, it's on Bandcamp. It's on Apple, Presto Music, so Spotify as well.
that's wonderful. Yeah, you're so techy. Now, I title our interview as any viola jokes. So for those of our guests listening to us, and historically, violas usually get sort of bullied, right, by other instruments, and there's a history. And why is that, Greg?
Uh, you know, I guess for those violists, I can tell there are probably a few violists watching right now, but quite often where the butt ends of jokes, rather than the sources of inspiration. I was a former teacher of mine, John Graham, always used to say, "I refuse to tell viola jokes," just because he didn't want to perpetuate the, I guess, the guilt and shame that often goes with them. Um, I was looking earlier today at TwoSet for some inspiration for some viola jokes, and some of theirs were really terrible. But one that I actually did like, or that kind of made me chuckle a little bit, was, what's the definition of an optimist?
I don't know. What's the definition of optimist?
Violist with a mortgage.
Violist with mortgage. That's not brutal enough. Yeah. Okay. I have one. I have one. I don't remember many of them, but I know them. But this one, I always remember. Oh, before I say it, I just want to add something for those of you who do not know why are we being abused and why people make fun of violas. Is that first of all, it's okay for violas to tell viola jokes. Okay, if a violinist tells it, and we're gonna, he's gonna be, or he or she's gonna be in trouble. And historically, viola, the repertoire and the playing level is not as high as violin or cello, right? So why is that? Because viola itself is an instrument, is like a middle voice, and it doesn't get to play solo as much as a violinist, right? First violin, second violin in the orchestra. And so, and also in composition wise, not very many composers wrote viola concerto for
Historically,
viola.
though.
Historically, right. Now we have more. So the viola level kind of, it's like a, like a ship with water, right? And the water is high and then it's a little higher, and when low is low. So historically viola level was not as high as the violinist. But 20th century there's much more composers wrote viola repertoire, and then the level of playing is getting higher and higher, right? Correct.
Right. And I would say even in the last 20 something odd years that I've been working as a violist, it has definitely evolved in terms of the standards and the level of playing. So where certainly the competitiveness getting into colleges is on par with violins and cellos in ways that it might not have been
Right.
20, 30 years ago.
Right. Oh, before I tell my joke, how about you play something for us?
Sure. All right. So I'm going to be playing for everyone a movement from Günter Raphael's second sonata, which was written in 1940, and this is the last movement. And it was written at a time where he was still relatively optimistic about where things were in the world. I should add that. Well, actually, I'll say this now. Shortly after Hitler came to power in the mid-1930s, Günter Raphael was diagnosed with tuberculosis, which prior to antibiotics being available, this meant that he was often having to stay in sanitariums in open, cool air environments. And actually, it was his doctors that were able to save him from having to be sent to a concentration camp, because anytime the SS police would come, his doctors would lie and hide him in the morgue, saying, "Oh, you just missed him. He passed away a short while ago." But writing this 1940, he was still relatively optimistic about the outcomes of things, and you can hear that in his style of writing. So let me just put my glasses on. All right. Thank you.
Nice. Very nice. So, how do you describe his style? Is it a romantic, early romantic?
You know, his the interesting thing about his style is, and this is what I wrote about in my dissertation, is it evolved from the beginning of his career, as most composers do. When he started writing for in the early 1920s, it was definitely much in the late Romantic style, uh, while also trying to capture some of the neo-Baroque movement that was happening. So in his first sonata, if you look at the titles of the movements on the album, uh, you have gavottes, you have fugues, and they're very thick fugues for that matter. And certainly gavottes and gigs, kind of evoking the Bach suites in that sense. Um, when you listen to some of the tracks later on in the album, particularly from the last sonata, which he wrote 1946, he's kind of experimenting with what he calls a tonal 12-tone style. So using they're very chromatic movements. I would say they're also pretty modal. And some of his other sonatas, like the one he wrote in 1954 for viola and piano, get sounding more like Schrecker or Alpenberg or something, or like some of the composers that were experimenting more with serialism during that time. So you get a little bit of that on the last few tracks of the album that I recorded.
Yeah, some like a mix of, like you said, several styles. Very interesting. Now, tell us a little bit about how you became a violist.
Wait, say that again. How I became a violist?
Yeah, how?
So I did start out as a violinist, and I switched during the senior between my junior and senior year of high school. I had an orchestra teacher at the end of 10th grade who I was going to an orchestral camp up in Saratoga Springs, New York, and she sent me off with a school viola. And it was a really clunky instrument. And she said, "You're going to learn how to play this over the summer, and you're going to take auditions for youth orchestras the next fall." And so I took her advice, and I did practice the viola quite a bit that summer, and auditioned for viola and violin for the New York Youth Symphony, and got in on viola. And then auditioned for the BU at Tanglewood Institute on both instruments, got in on viola. Auditioned for All State. I actually got in on both instruments, but for senior year, but decided to go on viola instead of violin, mainly because the repertoire that they were doing that year seemed more exciting. And by the time I was getting towards senior year of high school, it felt like the universe was saying, "Be a violist, you'll have more fun and you'll have more opportunities." And it really hasn't been until the last few years that I've been doing a little bit more experimenting and performing on violin.
Wow, that's a great story. And where where were you, where were you grew up? Is your parents musical?
So my mom likes to claim, and it is true, she was my first piano teacher when I was much younger. And then I grew up on Long Island in Suffolk County, in a small town called Shirley, New York, which is part of the William Floyd School District, and I was incredibly lucky to have a really supportive music department, both in terms of string teachers. There were a lot of really good classroom music teachers and choral teachers as well in that program. But it was a very supportive environment. Started on piano and violin, and then by the time I got to high school, was playing viola as well. And the viola ended up winning out over the piano and violin.
Wow, this is great stories, about viola. And I can tell you just a little bit about, I'm a violist, right? We met as a viola activity, very similar to yours, because I play the violin, and before that I played the piano because my mom is a professional pianist. So
Mhm.
and then I decided violin is easier because there's only one line of music to read, where your piano has four lines. So I played the
Right.
violin, and then until I joined the youth orchestra, like you are. By the way, NYU, my son played in NYU since 2014. Yeah.
Oh wow.
But yeah, Sean. Anyway, so when I was in youth orchestra, right, and then I overheard my conductor telling another violinist, say, "If you play the violin, you can come in. You can come join us." In other words, means they're short of violist. If you play the viola, sorry, if you play the viola, you can join us. So I was like, "What is a viola?" I never even knew, there's a viola out there. So I tried every time there's a rehearsal break. I will go play the principal viola's viola. And
Mhm.
then, yeah, and after a while, I say, oh, I can play the viola. So the orchestra lended me a viola. So I became a violist when I was 15. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because even before 10th grade, when Mrs. Mole was the orchestra teacher who suggested that I try it out, I remember even when I was a little bit younger, I would borrow friends' violas, and I know at that point everyone was learning the Telemann Concerto, and I was like, ooh, this is a really fun piece, and I would just try to play it by ear without the music, and so it was kind of like the instruments were calling at me long before I was ready to admit to that.
Yeah. So I think it takes certain personality to play the viola. If you are very flashy, if you wanted to be the leader, of the orchestra or chamber music group, and not everyone sort of uh, not everyone is willing to be a middle voice,
Mhm.
right? Yeah. So this leads to my viola joke. So people make fun of a violist, right? So it seems like Ryan is a violist. Hi, Ryan. Ryan says, playing viola definitely got me opportunity. I can bring out the comments. Opportunity that I don't think I would have had if I played the violin. Indeed, indeed. So, thank you, Ryan. And so, what was I saying? Oh, viola jokes. So I have one. It's pretty bad. What is the difference between a viola and a trampoline?
You bounce when you jump on the trampoline.
Oh, you're so nice. You take you. Anybody else know in the audience what is the difference between a viola and a trampoline? Before I give out, Mark. Anyway, all right. So I gave it to you. Okay.
Sure.
The the difference between the viola and the trampoline is that you take off your shoes when you jump on trampoline.
Oh no.
That's a bad one, huh? Anyway.
That kind of reminds me of the perennial. I like using it for clarinets, but the difference between a clarinet and an onion. What's the difference between cutting up a clarinet versus cutting up an onion?
You cry when you cut the onion.
Right. Yeah. That one's an old one,
Yeah,
an
yeah,
oldie
yeah,
but goodie.
yeah.
But
You don't cry when you cut the clarinet. So there's so many. If you Google viola jokes, probably have like 3 or 4, 5 pages. Yeah, um, yeah. So now you are teaching, right?
Mhm.
So what is your, how to say, how do you inspire your student in practicing?
Oh, that is a really good question. I think it's more. I, well, at this point, I'm mostly working with college age students and sometimes advanced high schoolers. So usually, a lot of them are already pretty self motivated. I know. In terms of the syllabus that I give them, it's usually like recommended amount of hours that they should be practicing per day, and I know within that there's the realities of balancing homework from other classes. Um, I think if there's repertoire that you're working on or there's technique that you feel like you need to learn, and it's more a matter of I usually try to steer them to being goal oriented so that they're able to get to a point where they're learning what they want to learn, whether it's in particular etudes or exercises or particular piece so that they're getting to the point where they can perform it at the level that they feel they should be at. And then it becomes the question of, well, what is it going to take for you to get to that point? So I guess it's kind of like flipping it on its head, so that it's not so much about, you have to do 5 or 6 hours. I mean, and if you can, that's awesome. And there have been certainly points in my life where that was 5 to 6 hours was definitely the goal and the norm, as much as humanly possible, while balancing exercise and sleep and classes and everything in between. But there's going to be some people that's not their reality, and that's okay too.
In terms of making an album, is this your first album?
It is.
Okay. So, what is the most challenging thing for making this?
That's a really good question. I would say it was going back to the self-motivation. The recording aspects were challenging because it took several months to prepare the 3 sonatas. I ended up shortly before I started recording, I started performing them at various venues, both of this country and actually in Berlin, and at the International Viola Society Festival, International Viola Society Congress in Poznan, Poland in 2019. So I was using those as opportunities to air out the pieces a bit. But I'd say probably, aside from the recording, it was the editing. Since I ended up going back and listening to each of the tracks myself, and you take several takes of each piece, and and quite often, and this is what many recording artists will do to various degrees, when you're putting various portions of them together, it took several months to go through that, and it was more just turning through that, and of course the pandemic slowed all of that down as well, and I think it was just carving out time to get everything done.
So, by the time from beginning to now, is that taking what, 4 or 5 years?
A little over 5 years. From
Wow.
the first, it took about 2 years to get all 13 tracks recorded, and part of it was also making sure that there was a good balance in the bank account to cover everything. So that also influenced when things were recorded, and much of it was crowdfunded, which certainly helped with the recording aspects of it.
Wow, that's a lot of work. Now, in terms of producing, practicing, and now you need to distribute, you need to find audience to buy your CD or, get the word out.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you find distribution difficult? Do you find finding audience is a different species?
I would say I'm still trying to figure out how that's working. A lot of this I'm doing at this point on my own, and I don't have a publicist at this point. Although if there are any publicists out there listening that want to collaborate, let's talk after this. But a lot of it, I think I've been trying to figure out how to connect with people I know and have known at various points in my life, and that's at least been what I've been trying to do over the last few months, and just say, hey, this is hope you're doing well in where you are in your life at this point. This is what I've been up to. I'd love to share it with you if you're willing to take a listen. And that's been at least getting things started. I've been doing some solo performances. I was out in Iowa last month, and got to share certainly the second sonata with people, along with other pieces that I've been working towards presenting.
So it is kind of a practical when you play a sonata, is solo viola, right? It's
Mhm.
easier for you to just bring your viola and go places to present.
Right.
Otherwise, you have to have a pianist, right?
Right. Oh, for sure. I don't get me wrong. I love collaborating with pianists and I love collaborating with other musicians, but sometimes it's easier to, just hop on a plane by yourself and your suitcase and your viola, and you're all set because I guess violas do fit on most standard airplane luggage compartments overhead.
Who did you study with, viola wise?
So um, for my undergrad, I worked with Michel Lacourse, and for my master's with George Taylor at the Eastman School of Music, and Michel, of course, I was with at Boston University, where she still teaches. And then for my doctorate, I worked with both Karen Richer and Linda Sinanian, who is a violinist based on Long Island.
Wow,
And
great teachers, great teachers. So why not every violist or violinist get a PhD? So what is your motivation to get a DMA, right? I guess DMA.
so well, I I don't think it was necessarily what I always wanted to go for. I My freshman year at BU, I was lucky to be placed in a string quartet with three composers, and they're all still active these days. In particular, the two violinists from the quartet who I've stayed friends with, both uh, George Lamb and Ruby Fulton, and they were all a few years older than me. I was the lowly freshman, and they were seniors. And the cellist Mike Hakem was a grad student, and they all had these plans of going for PhDs in composition afterwards. And it was like, oh, is there one for viola? And so it was kind of planted in the back of my brain early on that that would be something I was interested in doing. I didn't really know what it meant as a freshman and how long it would take or how challenging it is. But and actually, one of the other cool things about being in a quartet with them is we actually, uh, we ended up doing a lot of interesting collaborations, including we co-wrote a string quartet together, where we each took our hands at writing a movement of the quartet, and we called ourselves the Government A Quartet because we figured that we would be listening for the government sponsored A whenever we'd start tuning.
Interesting, you mentioned about composing. A lot of players, violinist, string player, or I don't know, even pianist, they do not really compose. And people ask me how come. Even today, one of my friends I met on Clubhouse, she's a musician, and she said, "You should write music. You should compose." I was like, "Oh, good idea." So, tell me a little bit how you, because we're so used to playing somebody else's works, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not wired. I'm not wired to think about writing myself in terms of
Mm-hmm.
music. I always feel like you have to like have education. You have to know harmony. You have to know, this and that. So tell me a little bit how you do that.
So I don't. Right now, I haven't been doing any composing lately. I've been doing more. Occasionally, I'll do some transcriptions of things as needed. And I kind of took a hiatus from composing when I started the doctorate, in part because I started getting writer's block, and I think part of it was just having to focus so much of my efforts on uh, the academic side of the research, the writing, and trying to keep up the practicing that something had to give for a little while. But when I was composing, and I try to, um, I was trying to think of it from the perspective of what is it do that I have to say, and I know a lot of composers who are both active performers. usually there's something burning inside them that they need to get out and express by way of composition. And even though right now I haven't been composing, I try when I lately the other pieces that I performed in Iowa, and I'll probably continue to perform them again. Aside from Gunter, Raphael, and a little bit of solo Bach, I've been gravitating towards the works of friends who are composers and also living composers, and also underrepresented composers, whether they're Black, they're trans, or other underrepresented groups. And that's been one of the priorities that I have as a performer, but and also female identifying composers as well. But as an interpreter of new music, I also try to make sure that I'm trying to get into their brain. What is it that they're trying to convey in a certain passage? And I guess having that sort of psychological approach, I try to have it help to inform my performances in a way.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if it always works, but
no, very well said. It's like you need to have an urge to say something, to tell stories, right?
Mhm.
You're not just doing it because someone asked you to doing homework. So that's very interesting. Yeah. So maybe I should try. I want to share your website to people. This is nice. Lovely.
Thanks.
Yeah. So this is let's see, Greg, right? GregWilliams.com. Yeah. Very nice.
It's Gregory K. Williams
Gregory K. Williams, yeah.
Violist.com. And I should give a shout out and thank you to actually Ryan, who's been commenting, has been helping to keep the website up to date.
Oh, hi Ryan. Great. I need a website master. So you can order from Amazon, Bandcamp, Presto Music, Apple Music, Spotify, and what do you call
Naxos, yeah.
Naxos, yeah. And let's see, those are the events, project, blog. You're busy, and teaching philosophy, teaching experience, media. You have a YouTube channel, right?
I do.
Yeah. So recording and let's see. Yeah. So this is what? Can I click on?
Sure.
Okay. You're teaching or you're playing?
No, I'm playing there.
Oh. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let me get this out. Shark Fin, how was that sound to you? Because sometimes when we play in here on stage, sounds good, and then by the time streaming to our audience, sounding a little bit kind of a squeaky, Yeah. So hopefully it's good sound. Hi Ryan. All right. So now.
And I should add that piece that you played, "Cave of the Heart" by Donna Doyle. She's a colleague of mine at Queens College, and it was a piece that I stumbled upon in my filing cabinet. She gave me a few years before COVID started, and I ended up recording that about 4 years ago, and it's actually one that I've performed a few times since then, and it's a really great piece. And actually, she has an arrangement of it for saxophone as well. So if there are any saxophonists listening today.
How
Uh,
long? How long is the whole work?
it's a short piece, about 3.5 minutes or so.
Uh, yeah. So, so you teach. That is your main gig, and I see you also do a lot of, orchestra or ensemble gig.
Well,
Tell us a
I
little
would
bit.
say actually I wouldn't. I mean, I do quite a bit of teaching, but I at this point I would say that it's not even the full gamut of what I do. I want to say that it's more like maybe roughly a third or half of it, depending on what is going on at a given point in time. Because at this point I'm doing a lot more playing than I would have been a few years ago.
That's great. So tell us, educate us. Some of us are not concert violists. How does a people like you in general survive play music? Because people always think like we are we're starving musicians.
So I would say, I consider myself at this point, a freelance musician, and it's quite often, there's no handbook on how to do this, and this is something that performance majors and even quite often have to figure out how to juggle, putting on so many different hats. So in a given week, I might be playing with one or two different orchestras, have a handful of students on, 1 or 2 days of the week. And frankly, no 2 weeks are quite the same at any given point in the year. Um, it takes a lot of discipline, and I would say a lot of sacrifice too. Sometimes, you're not necessarily seeing your friends as much as you would like, or being able to go to every family gathering that you would hope for. And it's hard sometimes finding that uh, that way of juggling things, and it depends. Sometimes some gigs are there was a point where I was doing playing a lot of weddings when I first got started, and I've kind of pivoted. I feel like over the course of the last 15 or so years of my career, I've had different points where I was doing a lot more teaching and less playing, and at different points I've had to flip the script a bit, and so right now it's a lot more playing, and which to me feels like it's a really good balance, because now I can, with the limits on how many students that I'm working with, I'm able to concentrate more on how I can help them better and more effectively, especially when they're at higher levels and on the verge of having careers of their own. How can I best help them? And that, just thinking about that and brainstorming, who can I introduce them to, or who should they be playing for, when they finish up. Those are important things to be actively thinking about.
have you have you teach beginners of violin?
I did, and actually, I even during the start of COVID, I ended up having a few violin and viola students on Zoom, and um, I found the work really rewarding, and I enjoyed working with the students. There came a point where it became too much of a good thing.
So what is the challenge of playing giving lesson on Zoom?
um, so, I mean, I've had to adapt over the last, and I still will have occasional Zoom lessons with students if they're not feeling well, or if I'm not feeling well. And I think there's certainly perks to that where you can have that flexibility. Or if you're working with a student who lives, you know, across the country or halfway around the world, it's great for sample lessons for anyone who's looking to study with a teacher on the opposite end of the country but can't afford the plane ticket. Um, I have, invested in microphones and light fixtures to help make it so that it's easier for them to see me and hear me. Um, sometimes it's hard to see on the other side. If you have your viola up, sometimes it's a little bit more challenging to see what is the thumb doing. Is it squeezing while you're playing? And really thinking about hand position issues. Sometimes I had one student for the longest time. Whenever she would appear on the screen, you wouldn't see her face because you just see the viola. And even after trying to get her to adjust it, sometimes some students don't want to be seen in their entirety, or they're not really, or they might be camera shy or something like that. So those were some of the challenges, and certainly during COVID, some of the other challenges were attention spans, especially when it's one thing if this is the only thing that they're doing online, but if they especially 3-4 years ago when everything was online, there were some students that thrived in that environment, and there were others who weren't having it.
Yeah, with all the challenges, I find another challenge is the sound. I find
Yes.
this, yeah, because if I play, they cannot play. We cannot simultaneously. And then the sound is a little squeaky, right? Very
Mhm.
high pitched. So now, do you have any tips for us when you teach beginners? What was your principle or strategy, and do you use the Suzuki method?
So I've used the Suzuki method when I was working with beginners, but I've had Suzuki training as well, at least through the first few books. I haven't gone all the way through at this point, and I found it helpful. I was telling this to a grad student the other day. I was thinking about taking Suzuki training, and one of the things that I found it helpful was to for me, certainly when I first started out, to have the comfort and the language for speaking with the parents, because with the Suzuki method, it's not just how you're connecting teacher to student, but it's also more of like a three-way factor between the student, teacher, and parents. And so I found those the training to be really helpful for me, at least with that, and to find a more comfortable ground for that. In terms of how I approach working, with beginners, and I would say that this is not even just for beginners. This is even for my more advanced students. It's really trying to see them as a person, as an equal, not like, I'm this, I've been teaching longer than you've been alive. You must, obey everything I say. It's really more trying to respect them for who they are, and trying to get them to learn, figure out what is it that they like about playing this strange, mysterious instrument, and trying to help unlock some of those mysteries. So, and even for when you're working with a student that's been teaching for several years, or not teaching, sorry, when you've been working with a student who's been playing for several years, sometimes they're coming to you at a point where maybe their relationship with their instrument is not at its highest, and you kind of have to find ways to bring them back into, or rejuvenate that initial joy that they had playing the instrument. I don't know if that answered the question that you had, but
No, you said great things. I I did not know Suzuki method when I was playing the viola in conservatory or even graduate school. And then when I moved to New York, I went to school for strings. I want
mm,
to find out what exactly why is so great about. So I read books about Suzuki, and I really appreciate his philosophy. Meaning, he was not raising concert instrumentalist. He
mm,
was raising human beings. So
right.
yeah, that's a great philosophy. And yeah, but I always find making my student practicing is such a challenge. Yeah, I myself.
Mm,
So I would say I say you should go to listen to live concert, at least once a month or
mm,
4 times a year. I think a live concert can really, hopefully, hopefully showcase from a not on the screen, real. There's this three dimensions in front of you. Hopefully, you inspire by the person playing in front of you, right?
Oh, for sure. And I know my family, or my you asked before whether there were other musicians in my family, and the answer, aside from my mom having played growing up, my grandfather was he was a machinist by day, but by night, on nights and weekends, he was a professional clarinetist and trumpet player in a Greek wedding band for several decades, and getting to see what he was doing was a great inspiration for me. And getting together for family gatherings, it would be gathering around the piano and playing all sorts of fun songs, and doing a lot of improvising, and even doing some composing for not just for my grandfather or my mom and myself, but also for my younger siblings, both my brother and sister. My brother played clarinet, my sister played flute. So there were all sorts of, I mean, that was kind of a staple of what we did. And, and it's fun seeing, when you have students where where they have other family members that are musicians as well, having that sort, and I would imagine with your own family, having that way of connecting throughout your life with your most favorite collaborators in a way.
I used to fight with my mom. Whenever we play together, we fight. But Sean, my son, got into Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that is a very nice accomplishment. I feel I did not abuse him too much. Chinese tiger mother. But speaking of work, we need to wrap up soon. Speaking of work, even 25 years ago, when I first moved to New York, and the freelancing scene is already diminishing. So, what do you see? These students, your students, somebody else's student, when they graduate, what are they gonna do?
So one of the takeaways that I had when I was graduating from my master's at the Eastman School of Music, something 15, 16 or so years ago, was a lot of people saying, that the freelance scenes are drying up, and that may be true to a certain degree, but the thought was you create your own work, and you create your, especially when you're first starting out. When I first moved back from Rochester, initially to Long Island and then the city, I was coming up with all sorts of concert series that I would have for initially my hometown, or some of the other music schools I was teaching at the time. I was able to do recitals there and get chamber concert series going. And you kind of have to create your own work until others are noticing, oh, look at what he or she's doing. I'd like to work with them. And you kind of have, it's hard, and you have to be very self-motivated. I mean, because there's only a handful of, in a given year, there might be a dozen or so major orchestra positions opening up, and it's hard to juggle that, or and if there are several dozen people that are doing, applying or auditioning, it's like winning the lottery when you've earned that spot. So
Right. I like what you said. Create your own, path, and because everyone is different, right? And everyone's ability, and also realistically, orchestra are downsizing, right?
right.
Yeah.
And even some of the orchestras that I've won positions with are, there seems to be like a earthquakes going. Speaking of the earthquake today, the ground is very unstable with many smaller groups where which could be a whole separate conversation.
Yeah.
But it's shaky ground.
Yeah.
And so that's why, you kind of, I'm constantly reinventing and refining and retooling, because that's what we all have to do to keep going. And if we talk again in a year or two, I would imagine I might be doing slightly different things than what I'm doing right now too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Greg, and for being here with me. And also, I want to thank our audience who wrote comments, and I'm sure there are a lot of people on at home listening or next to your computer listening. And Shakfin, thank you so much for always supporting us. And Ryan, great to meet you. And you're a violist, I would assume.
He is.
Yeah, Colette, great to see you, Colette. Yeah, Lewis early was here, and who is? Oh, Ilana.
Ileana, yes, also a
Ileana.
very good violist.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's wonderful. Yeah, I remember when we met, we played in Koreana. Is it called Koreana Cafe?
Oh,
Uh,
Cornelia.
Cornelia Cafe, yeah. That was like a lot of violists who all play together.
Mm-hmm.
That's so much fun. And William, thank you so much. Lewis, thank you so much for being with us. And yeah, I do this live interview on Fridays pretty regularly. So check out our next Friday. And do you have anything to add on, Gregory?
No. Thank you so much. It's been a great pleasure.
Buy your CD.
Yes.
Buy Gregory's CD.
And special. Where did it go? And special thanks also to Affetto Records for being the label to help bring this to life. And they have other great artists as well that whose works deserve to be championed as well. So
yeah, so it's on Amazon, right?
Amazon, Apple, Naxos, Bandcamp, Spotify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so support our
Presto Music
artists. Yeah, I like the cover. Nice.
Oh, the cover I should add was done by Jerry Castillo, who was a classmate of mine in high school, and is a very accomplished artist based in Brooklyn.
Nice. It looks like a Mozart's home, looking out of a Mozart's window. Looks like Austria.
Yes, but it was meant to depict the gloom and despair of war-ravaged Germany after World War II.
Oh, wow.
Hence the green and yellow lightings.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So don't forget, you guys, all the description of Greg and myself is underneath here, and then subscribe this channel. Also subscribe Gregory's channel. Yeah, we're also on Facebook and Instagram, so we're everywhere. Yeah. So okay, great. So if anybody wants to re-listen, re-watch, this is gonna be few minutes later. It's gonna be a replay on this channel. So yeah, share with your friend. Okay, we're gonna close. Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
yeah, stay stable and go hide underneath the table.
Yes, the ground just shook about a minute ago, actually.
Really? Right
Yes.
now?
Yeah.
I didn't feel that. Oh my god. Wow.
Here
'Cause
in
it
Queens,
was
at least.
It was shaking like 11 o'clock a.m.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. All right. Take care.
All right. Stay safe.
Bye.
Thanks again, Ching.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm gonna end stream. Bye bye, everyone.